We are the board. Prepare to be... Wait, you're watching your father's sci-fi show? Never mind. Keep doing what you're doing.
Take it away, Scott.
Welcome to another episode of your father's Sci-Fi show. Most entertaining 15 minutes on the internet. With us as always, Frank and Paul. I mean, it's Paul's show. He might as well be here, right? But we had some discussions over what we were going to talk about today, and it has changed. An idea was floated that we would discuss tropes in sci-fi, but it looks like we're actually going to talk about world building, which is another one of my semi-favorite things to destroy script writers on. Paul?
And rightly so.
What? Oh, yeah. World building is essential for anything if you're creating science fiction, fantasy content. World building mitigates continuity errors. If you have it down, a good writer's Bible, a lot of notes, a lot of pre-planning, you're not going to have as many continuity errors. Yeah. That's my idea on that.
Well, do you really think that, and I'll jump in with a question before Frank chimes in, but do you really think that it's world building that creates the problems in writing? I think it's just I just think it's the simple fact that the person that writes the story doesn't take anything else into consideration. It's a continuity issue. I don't see that as a world building issue.
Well, there's two ways that the world is built. You either pre-plan it
right
before you start writing anything, or
which is the best way, by the way,
or you just make it up as you go.
Which is the worst way to do it.
You might have some outline or some rules that you might want to go with, but you really just building details as you go. Yeah. Pretty much like Star Trek's first TOS run, because they didn't know what was going to happen, so they
winged it.
They winged it. They had three seasons.
If you're talking classic Trek, I like to think that at least every episode is an anthology that just sort of is in the same universe. But you might see some pairings, you might see some continuity between writers, like all the episodes written by DC Fontana will kind of harmonize and have the same technological style. Mm-hmm. But Larry Niven will come in and do something completely different or change a rule that was established by Fontana. So it has notes of an anthology in it. Because we are using the same characters, but sometimes it's like...
Right.
Would Spock do that?
Like how technology is used.
Yes. The transporters, they should have just freaking went to Lucille Ball and got the money to do more shuttle modeling, and just.
Well, I think they could have even gotten away, and I saw it in Deep Space Nine. I got to noticing it, and all of their roundabout launches were exactly the same footage.
That's why
they might flip it, but it was exactly the same footage every time.
That's
and I got to notice that as I was rewatching the series. Drove me nuts. But even
that's how you save money.
Yeah, well, you just have to have one establishing shot.
I'm not offended by them trying to save money. I'm really not.
But it's funny because I hadn't noticed that when I watched the series, because Spaceflight, it was a very sessile show. Most of it occurred on board the station. So
sure. Yeah.
but I'll take your word for it because that sounds perfectly logical.
Well, I tend to notice things when stuff is being filmed or things are being done. One of my, and it's not a world building thing per se, but they make a big issue in Star Trek: The Next Generation that Data can't use contractions,
Right.
and literally in the first episode he uses 2.
Yeah.
In the whole, and I'm like, okay. Yeah, it's like
I never understood that, but whatever.
Well,
That's because the people writing the scripts don't have a good editor who knows you can't do that.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep when I'm trying to just keep my contractions in dialogue and actually try to write the words out
right
in the body of them.
Yeah,
I used to do that in text. Like when I was texting, I would never use contractions. And then now I get to the voice of the text where I'm just like, if it's even close, I'll send it. I don't care.
Yep. I would like just to take a moment to give who I consider the best world builders some credit. Frank Herbert is in science fiction. I know no one who's done a better job than him. 1,500 pages of notes is Brian Herbert found, and I'm like, I mean, the stuff that hit the editing room floor may very well exceed what was written on the page.
And you can see that in his appendixes and his glossary and
in the cross-reference volumes 8 through 12.
Yeah. You've got to keep good notes.
Tolkien did the same thing.
Well, I think
he had a lot of.
I think if you're going to be a writer and you're going to write something as epic as Dune, then you would need to have your ducks in a row. You would just sit down and and unfortunately, we're going to. I think we're going to harp on Star Trek a lot during this. I really do, because they're probably the most egregious at
continuity or
failing world building. Is there's stuff that goes on that I go, I'm sorry, I don't understand it.
SETI Alpha 6 exploded. Never mind.
Yeah.
Or maybe
that's long.
There's just too many people writing stuff. So
as we approach the dead horse that is SETI Alpha 6 and beat it with our blunt object.
There's the idea that the story is paramount and everything should fit the needs of the story, even if the story doesn't match up with everything else. That's their thought process.
Well, but see, here's the problem. There's certain things in the process of world building that I go, why?
Right.
You have a group of essentially simians. These creatures that are completely covered in fur, and they're wearing see-through plastic clothing.
Yeah.
Why? I mean, it rates
right
up there with reptiles.
They have fashion
winter
sense.
environments with me. I'm like,
and they're moving fast, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's
cold-blooded.
you see it. You see it time and time again. Like I said, Star Trek is probably the worst for it. There was the episode of Next Generation where they had, and I realized the humanoid races and they're trying to be creative and they're trying to be whatever, but you've got this race that has this thing, it goes from their nose down to their chin.
Yeah.
How do you eat?
Very carefully.
Really, how do you eat? It just doesn't seem like
the size of their mouths, I guess. I don't know.
You're like 2 straws? The hell, I don't know. But it's some of the things that you see where the environment versus the people that live there just completely don't match.
Right.
Star Wars, okay, you've got an ice planet, okay, fine, with reptiles.
I have an answer for that.
I don't know how.
But George Lucas didn't solve that problem. That problem was solved by a role-playing author 10 years later. So, or 7
Well,
years later.
here's the perennial issue that I have, and And I will be the one that will acknowledge that Frank has probably read more things having to do with Star Wars than any 15 Star Wars fans combined. But the issue is this: I don't read that stuff. I don't care about the role-playing game. All of it's irrelevant. 99% of the people like me are going to go, if it's on the screen, there it is.
Yep.
So it's okay that somebody explains it, but it's not explained in the movie.
All right.
Which one was the reptiles?
Where did you learn that the Tauntaun was a reptile?
I didn't say it was a tauntaun. See, you automatically assumed.
Well, I don't even know which one you're talking about because I didn't think
Which one? Which
it was Star Trek. Anyway, there was some one of the science fiction shows.
There was a Wampa creature that hit Luke, and there was the Tauntauns, and I thought
right. Well, no,
both of those were
as
mammals.
best as I know, the Wampa is mammalian.
Yeah,
it's a warm-blooded creature.
Right.
But anyway,
that's not
world building.
Tauntaun is. I never thought of the Tauntaun as being a reptile. Maybe I'm thinking Star Trek. Well, yeah, the J.J. Abrams.
It is a reptile.
They're on an
but
ice planet.
You must have gotten that from somewhere.
The Spock
role-playing related.
The planet where Spock had
where Spock was trapped, where they abandoned Spock so he could watch the destruction of Romulus
through some super
like you can see the destruction of the planet.
Magnifying glass. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Some serious gravitational lensing because there was a black hole in orbit around the. I don't know if it's. J.J. Abrams likes to bring planets close so people can see shit. So that
I believe the key word in that is J.J. Abrams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did that shit. Well, yeah. But and that's poor world building. Yeah.
I have marshmallows. There's a dumpster burning over here. Anyway.
But again, right. But again, it falls back to, and let's look at that world that they abandoned Spock on. It's an ice planet. Nothing grows. Why are there animals there?
Well,
Star Wars, they're underwater. It's a planet. They've got an ungodly huge fish that tries to eat the ship. Then they've got an ungodly fish larger than that trying to eat that one. And then, wow, never saw this coming. A third fish comes up and eats them both.
Not to mention the fact that they passed through the planet's core, a planet that looked very Earth-like.
Right.
Oops.
Yeah.
And in short order, too. It was very fast.
Quicker to go through the core. No, I don't think so.
Not really.
I don't think so.
6,000 kilometers.
Star Wars, as far as world building is concerned, George Lucas was delinquent in leadership, and other guards of his property had to come in and fix things. And of course, he didn't like the fact that they did a better job than him.
Well,
so he kind of got angry and created prequels and broke things.
His approach was everybody draw something, and we'll figure out what to use.
Well, it's still, I mean, and I think
it's fantasy anyway. He doesn't care about the science of
But that's the issue. That's why you have things that happen in shows like in the Book of Boba Fett, where you've got a group of people, sand people, and materials and supplies are very, very, very scarce, and yet they're burning
wood,
wood and metal and all this kind of stuff just because a person died. Now, I would find it more believable if they took a line out of a Star Trek Next Generation issue where a guy dies and people are like, well, I'm the closest thing he had in the family, so I claim all of this stuff. He's buried naked.
If you use the Tusken Raiders as Fremen, they should have done that. And of course,
right.
I gave you a link to a book you could read that you're not going to read, written by Kevin J. Anderson, where he does a deep dive on the Tusken Raiders, and let's just say his story is better by an order of magnitude. But I digress. Let's talk about world building. Paul also talked about Tolkien. Tolkien had a monstrous index of additional material. One of the things is with world building is you really don't know where the story is going to go. So you kind of need places to go because as you're building a story, sometimes the pieces of the puzzle assemble in a way you didn't think they were going to. And it's like, oh, wow, they're actually going to that forest, which I created and I didn't realize I was going there, but now we're going to go there.
Right.
Stuff like that happens in the creative process.
It does.
Well, this was my question. This was my question with the Ewoks. I mean, when now two things. Okay, first of all, they had a dress for Leia, which means at some point they captured and ate a woman her same size. Okay, let's put a pin in that for just a minute. But
Okay.
I think my main concern would be is why would they have viewed C-3PO as a deity as opposed to, you know, the Wookiee?
You'll have to
Just
go back to the
seems
Wizard of Oz for that, my friend.
just seems to me, and maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. Could be the fact that my head's clogged up and I got pink eye. I don't know. But it just seems to me that if they saw a really huge version of themselves, they would go, that's God. You know, they see a giant tin machine, they go, crap, we got to oil that thing. But, you know,
I have several answers for you.
He was
if you're willing
shiny.
to hear them. Originally, Return of the Jedi was going to occur on Kashyyyk, the Wookiee homeworld. And you remember the scene where Chewbacca swings and making a Tarzan sound with two other Ewoks, and they jump into an AT-ST? That was supposed to be Chewbacca and two of his. That's like a surviving element from the older script. Chewbacca and two of his cousins or child and whatever. Chewbacca was for George Lucas was tone deaf to the fact that Chewbacca was a Wookiee. The script kind of just realized that he was an Ewok. Let's just look at it that way. C-3PO, or I should say the Tin Woodman. The Tin Woodman in The Wizard of Oz rescues the Queen of the Mice in the Poppy Patch. And when he emerges from the Poppy Patch, forget about drug references. We're talking 1900 here. Tin Woodman comes out of the Poppy Patch. The mice, of course, these are sapient mice. These mice bow down and worship him because he saved their queen. So George Lucas carried that trope into Star Wars. That was supposed to be an on-the-nose kind of thing.
See, my own issue.
I just thought because he was shiny. He's shiny. They like shiny shit, like crows. Oh,
yeah. My own issue with Wizard of Oz goes way deeper than that. I'm much more twisted about it than anybody knows of, because you've got this movie where a 12-year-old girl is hanging around with a bunch of strangers, and one guy keeps asking her for a lube job, and nobody thinks that's unusual. It's just it's mind blowing. I hear all week. But no, it's again, I think if it goes to the world building issue, it goes, you know, you just see things in movies all the time and you go, okay, why? Okay, why? Okay, why? And if it makes sense to the story, okay, great, terrific. But if it doesn't, then at least me, I'm stuck with, okay, why?
I don't have an answer.
That is a good question to ask. The audience should be asking why, and the writer, director, editor should also be asking why. Another person I'd like to pay a little homage to is J.K. Rowling. Oh my goodness, that woman created an amazing universe, a huge cast of characters, all kinds of weird names of things, and different spells and different potions, different material components, from butterbeer to Ollivander's wand shop. Her universe is filled with interesting people, and it all generally makes sense. She has some sort of internal rule set that her universe operates under, and maybe 30, 40 years from now, one of her disciples will bring out her notes, and they'll make Frank Herbert's pile look small and Tolkien's pile look small, you know. But
well, I mean, I completely admire some of the stuff that's in there, and but what I also find interesting is that I can take a situation that happened in, you know, Harry Potter films and apply it to real world, and people don't like it. It's like everybody at his school open carried their weapons, and when somebody attacked the school, the students defended themselves.
Right.
Yeah. Throw that out in the real world, and holy crap, do people come unglued. But it just but I will say, and I will have, and I mean, you're not going to get an argument. You generally will get an argument from me, but not on that. I think J.K. Rowling did an extremely good job in the world that she built.
Oh my goodness, the detail. You go back and read one of those books a second or a third time, and you'll still pick up a handful of new things, new correlations.
Sure.
I mean, she also had the time to put symbolism in. That's one place where I think you're a little hard on George Lucas. But when for example, in Chamber of Secrets, Harry pulls out the Gryffindor sword.
Yeah.
That's an Arthurian moment. That's like the Sorting Hat chose Harry. Harry is the worthy one because he was able to pull the Gryffindor sword out of the Sorting Hat. That's Arthurian legend. That's her being very English.
Yeah.
I like that stuff.
Well, I think to an extent there's going to be some of those influences in there, whether they're conscious, whether they're subconscious. I don't know. I'm still
by Merlin's beard.
I'm still trying to figure out a lot of the Arthurian references that you get out of Star Wars, but I'm like,
I would recommend another book. I have another coffee table book. It's called The Magic of Myth.
Yeah, but it's
it's there.
I think though that good world building may take 1,500 volumes of planning, but I don't think that should come after. So when and we'll pick on Paul. Paul writes his stuff. He's got the world planned out. He knows what the world is. He knows the orbit of it. He knows all of these things about the planet that he's writing about, so that when things happen or things occur or things go on, it's nothing happens outside the realm of what should happen on that planet. I mean, it would be the same. I think probably if you go back to God.
Well, I can tell you.
Hate the movie. I saw it so many times. The Arnold Schwarzenegger mind thing where he winds up on Mars. Could you ask them Oz?
Total Recall.
Yeah, Total Recall. Yeah, I can't remember. It's called Total Recall. But yeah, it's like I'm sorry, just releasing. It's like, well, we've got a machine that's going to create the atmosphere on Mars. Yeah, dude, I think it's going to take more than about 20 seconds for that to happen. I'm not doubting that there could be a way that they could do something, create a machine. It would, I don't know, melt a massive amount of ice that would then vaporize and becomes nitrogen and oxygen and hydrogen and shit in the air. But I don't know. It just
it works more like a plot device. I agree.
Right.
And that's where it's not fun for me. I mean, and again, it's a lot of times when when I'm watching a show or watching a movie and there's something in it that sticks in my head, that I can't enjoy the show because, well, I'm trying to deal with this.
Okay, can I say something too? Can I say something too on my show?
Sure.
All right, good. I have to get a story from you guys. Well, you don't know how. I think my biggest regret with Bricator, the world, is knocking off 4 hours from the clock, because it is the biggest challenge to figure out how your days are structured under 20 hours. You wouldn't think 4 hours was that big of a deal, but when people are all still on a 24-hour clock, I got to figure out, when's the sun coming up? When's it going to go down? How are people structuring their life? So, okay, they'll just take it like an 8-hour shift.
Yeah.
Call them cycles.
Well, I mean, it's been an interesting thing, but it's also, I think, been one of the earmarks of what I love about it, because they have 2 times of daylight where they're doing things. One's not as long as the other, if I recall correctly, but there's things that go on in this one that don't happen in this one, But I mean, you build some really incredible worlds in the stuff that you write,
I think it's always
Paul takes responsibility for his creations. And that's why
it's easier to make a planet rotate slower than faster. I think people can adapt easier to a longer day than they can to a shorter day. But I got to have a
I mean,
spreadsheet. And I got to have everything marked out. Sometimes I have to go in and say, well, okay, this event takes place at this time, and it should take this amount of time to do something. So now it's this time, and okay, it's starting to get, it's in the late afternoon.
yeah, and I think that a lot of times writers
I,
don't consider those things.
I,
No, they don't.
Just don't. They everything's based off. I mean, it's sort of like, and I think that's the thing that I dislike about Star Trek. If there's something I have to say that I don't like about it, is by and large they're running into humanoids. That I understand, that I get. That's not my thing. But the really radically different creatures, the really radically different life forms, are always, they're like one-offs, or they're the bad entity, or they're the this or the that or the other.
right. They're
It's
monolithic.
called budget.
The creature that like ate through solid rock real fast,
The
had
Hornet.
the little egg nodules that were
Right.
made out of silicone. Awesome creature, but what happened to them? How did they wind up on that planet? Why was that? I ask these things.
Devil in the dark. Budget constraints is the problem. That I mean that monster probably took 2 episodes of budget up to make that giant pepperoni pizza that some mime was undulating underneath.
It was a wire frame with fur on it, okay,
Mhm.
and fake puke. Probably the same fake puke that they used for the creatures that didn't like sunlight. Okay, come on, man, help me out here.
They just didn't have the budget.
Well, and but see, here's the thing. Doctor Who, when it started in '63, they didn't have a budget either.
Oh no.
And they wrote some really phenomenal and believable story arcs. And they're, and I have to say that, even the fans of the original stuff, the stuff, you're talking Hartnell and from the start, the stories were good enough that people could overlook what wasn't there. It didn't matter because the stories were really good. And as we progress on up through the modern ones, I think they tend to lose a lot of it, because I was watching one time, and it was one of my favorite modern doctors, which was not Matt Smith, no, David Tennant. I like most of the modern doctors. I kind of like, but anyway, it was a David Tennant episode, and I was struck by just how much CGI was going on in the show, and I'm like,
You can see it, huh?
come on, you don't have to do this. You don't have to, but I guess as the show evolves and the character evolves and the writers are changed and society changes, then you're going to get what you get when you've got it going on, which is where the state of the show is now. And they're actually looking at, my opinion, they're trying to salvage the show by getting the better writer back, getting the better showrunner back, getting rid of, but it's difficult to, for that show, that type of continuity, all the different alien races that there are.
You're dealing with a show that's even older than Star Trek. And
Sure.
I am a big believer in that. You shouldn't try if continuity is and cogence is a priority. You can't make a show that spans 50 years because
Not
the
really.
world changes. You need to end it. You need to end it and start something new. Start The Expanse. Start Dark Matter. Start
way.
Farscape. You need to do something else.
And I'd say it's good world building with
The
The Expanse too.
Yeah, The Expanse is
I kind of blame the fans too. The fans will continue to they like this particular giant bag of potato chips, and they're just picking up crumbs now. The whole potato chips were gone a long time ago. And it's like at a point you have to say a story needs to end.
Yeah.
And then a new story needs to be written that's more relevant, that has brings in some new scientific thinking. That
Well, I mean,
I'll give-
there are things in Star Trek that the original series where they talk about, and they're supposed to be 150 years ahead of where we are right now, and it's still, when you look at it, it's like, yeah, no, that's been debunked for the longest time.
in the episode Miri, Spock is calling up data to the computer on the Enterprise, and I'm like, why isn't he just uploading a file? It's like, that's why sometimes shows need to end and you start something new, because
they even talk about computer tapes,
Right. That's what they knew.
and that's what was being used on computers back then. But
That's
you also have to understand, to be fair now, the little disc that they stuck into the computer to record stuff on. The number one reason why the 3.25-inch disc was that size was because of Star Trek. And that's a whole other, people have done shows on that, on how Star Trek created technology that is helping us to create Star Trek.
Right.
And it's, but
I believe it. I don't even try to think about what the medium of information stored in my universe.
Yeah. Oh my God.
It has to be invisible.
And I try to come up with a different way of explaining it. Things aren't megabytes and gigabytes. It's just a whole different word, just to get away from that frame of storage, of data storage.
Right.
Like, this is something different that we haven't conceived of yet, of a way they store information. So there's going to be different terminology.
And
there's no tiebacks to what we're doing.
Sure,
it's a different culture.
But as a writer, the problem is people understand terabytes.
Right.
And
it's a reference. People understand what you're talking about.
Right. And that can help and hurt a writer, because a writer can go, well, it's 43,000 teraquads of information.
But if I say something is two teraglyphs, which is what I'm using, or then you don't know what exactly that is, or how much it is, or
what in their science, in their computer system, what's glyph?
That's what they.
A half a mile of gear yardage of storage.
Yeah.
Another great world builder, Gibson and Sterling in the Difference engine.
Yeah, that was
line stream, pneumodynamics, to name a few. They came up with new words, and maybe that's something we could talk about in Battlestar Galactica. Yarans, ambrosia, centons, sectons.
It's just those little details that make it a place, make it a world.
Yes,
small details.
You need language. You need ornithopter. You need thumper, still suits. These are terms we don't have here.
And I think that is a huge part of the world building, is the fact that they're not using those words, and it sounds different, so it sounds alien, so it helps buy into the suspension of disbelief that yes, we're actually dealing with a planet where there's giant worms that shit, and people will kill each other to eat the shit.
It's hallucinogenic shit, and it gives you.
Isn't that what spice is? It's
either that or barf. We don't know.
I don't know. One of the
no,
two.
That's the water of life.
Yeah,
sure.
I don't know.
But even then, when you look at that, it's
we know the spice blows.
Yeah,
it's in the sand, and then it blows, and then you sit on the surface. You go scoop it up.
Yeah.
And you got a little shaker thing to get the cat turds out of it.
But it's world building. It's good world building.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes the world is just not built very well. There was a episode of, and I realize, again, and it's the hard thing for me, is because television shows have half hour or an hour, which equates to 22 or 44 minutes.
Right.
Unless it's a two-parter, to get all this stuff out. So a lot of times they really have to be blunt with what they present.
Yes.
So you have an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation where you have this planet found a cure for a disease on this planet, and Beverly goes, nope, these are addicts, and these are their drug dealers, you know. But just the concept that an entire planet is nothing but drug addicts.
We're getting there.
Yeah, well, we're getting, you know, it's like, do you have someone that you love?
Yes, who's been
well?
causing us the most trouble over the last 2 years? The big pharmaceutical companies.
Oh yeah, well, you know, I mean,
So yeah,
it's amazing. It's amazing to me.
Unfortunately, we only have one planet to live on, so we have to act out that episode here on terra firma.
Yeah,
right. Well,
I got to talk about Flash.
In this case, the pushers are on the same planet, but yeah,
yeah,
I do.
It's faster that way.
But it's, and that I think is one of the problems that I will acknowledge that a writer can be presented with, is it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. But as far as the story goes, it doesn't have to. But then again, I go back and I go, for me, it has to. I'm sorry, it has to make sense. I need to know why there are thickly furred animals living in a hot, humid climate. I need to know that. You know, it's like, but I don't know. I've been disgruntled with the whole concept of evolution ever since dinosaurs turned into chickens.
Because they have zippers.
You know,
so they can unzip.
We can do an episode on that.
They can unzip their fur and take it off, and I don't know.
Okay.
Well, because people like furry animals.
Fake fur is cheap at the art store. Could that be
people love furries? Wait,
no. That's another factor. There's a lot of factors here that favor the furry animals. I would like to talk a little bit about world building shortcuts.
Okay.
Flash Gordon and Firefly both found ways of removing interstellar travel out of the equation by putting all their kingdoms on one planet. Like a Mongol, you have Phrygia, which is frozen, the Arborea, which is deep forest. The Hawkmen live up in the sky and stuff like that.
Right.
Each one of those could be a planet. In fact, George Lucas did exactly that. The city of the Hawkmen became Cloud City, and Phrygia became Hoth, and Arborea could be Endor, etc., etc. In Firefly, they have a solar system that is it's a good word to say. It has a lot of satellites.
A lot of planets. Yes.
So interplanetary travel is a much smaller obstacle to overcome than interstellar travel. I guess those were kind of good mechanisms.
Yeah.
Because King Features Syndicate back 100 years ago. Wow, 100 years ago. Flash wanted to go to Arborea. He jumped in an airspeeder and just kind of flew there. And you didn't have to worry. I mean, Hans Zarkov, all he had to do was deorbit and then enter the orbit of Mongol, and he was on another planet because Mongol came to him.
Yeah.
And then the subsequent episodes occurred on Mars, which is another interplanetary, because we had no idea what Mars was like 100 years ago. And in Firefly, naturally, they bounce around from planet to planet, and it's kind of like a Wild West frontier, which was a good little shortcut to not have to worry about faster than light travel. So I thought those were kind of innovative.
Right, and that's like the way I'm using wormhole travel. I realized during that development that there is actually no need for spacecraft designed for interstellar flight. They can all be designed for orbital flight.
Right.
You use a wormhole to go from one planet's orbit to another planet's orbit.
Yep. And then you just use landers, shuttles, or lighters to.
You don't even need.
Is your elevator.
Yeah.
All the bigger ships, even though they can't exist, and they do exist, there's actual interstellar travel as well. If you don't use a wormhole drive. Huh?
Sneaky. That sounded like a spoiler if I've ever heard one.
No, it's just stuff that I've already noted.
It's just a way of understanding. It's a way of explaining something that one of the things that you look at
It's a good scene.
the Enterprise in most of the series. It was not designed to land.
No.
It wasn't designed to go into an atmosphere. But somehow the most amazing ship in all of the Federation that defies all logic and lives interspatially, I believe, would be the Voyager because of what it's capable of doing. It can land on a planet.
Yep.
It started off as a 15-deck ship and grew while it was out in the out in the Delta Quadrant. It's like so.
Well, the Borg did take over the ship at one point, so maybe they added a few decks. I don't know. They did. I recall Janeway saying, "Leave the circuitry; it's more efficient."
Well, there was
not that could have been a security compromise or anything, but
sure,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a short video I saw on YouTube about Voyager and what they did to it after they got it back to the Delta Quadrant, and it's like, yeah, that's pretty much what they did with that was probably the same thing they did with the Ark of the Covenant and Indiana Jones. It's stuck in a box, nailed it shut in a warehouse because it's like, no.
Starfleet learned how to make smaller hangars.
Well, yeah,
from the Voyager technology.
Like it had a blade of armor. There's not another ship in the Federation that had a blade of armor.
The hangar that's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, and it's got all the and it's got that shuttle materializer thing in there.
Well, you gotta be happy for them because coincidentally they were flung to the other side of the galaxy. They needed a ship that was robust enough to survive the journey back.
Right. Well, but see,
aside from the fact that the Enterprise went to the edge of the galaxy in episode 1,
and in the movie was underwater.
Even if you look at, and again, this is world building or continuity issues. One of the two.
Both.
You look at the episode The Cage.
Yes.
And they talked about something with 70,000 light years, and it would take them 4 weeks to get there.
Yeah. Yes.
And
traveling at the speed of plot.
Yeah.
We have that problem to a smaller degree in Star Wars, but we do.
Then you turn back around and Voyager was thrown 70,000 light years away from Earth. It's going to take them 40 freaking years to get home.
You only have to see the map of the Star Trek universe to go, well, how could they be this far away?
They should have had them flung to another galaxy.
Well, my issue with it was, and again, it goes back to world building. The Alpha Quadrant, the humans,
City Alpha 6
were the only ones
out
in the entire blinking galaxy that ever formed a federation. They're the only ones that ever did it. Because every time they ran across somebody, it was an empire. It was a this. It was a that. They were not together for the mutual benefit of the people in it. They were conquerors. They were this, or
it was a weird
just
show.
A whole bunch of people that knew each other and interacted with each other, but never went, hey, why don't we form a coalition?
Yeah, it's so Earth.
In a lot of ways, Voyager was like Farscape. John Crichton got flung across to another galaxy and had to try to find his way back through wormholes and stuff. Star Trek Voyager would have been better if they just ground the word Star Trek off and made it into some new show where continuity and space travel times could have been different and it would have worked because we'd be in uncharted territory. Well, there has to come a point where you say the story must come to an end for the benefit of everybody, because you can't read 40 years of garbage. Not everybody's a game master like me and those stupid, obscure things from the 70s. Your average writer, unless they're going to commit to consuming everything, you need to go in a different direction. You need to start over. And I don't like reboots. Put a link somewhere. Anyway.
No, I mean, I'm with you. The reboots merely show a lack of creative thinking. But if you look at Voyager, and we'll pick on it,
it's not a bad thing to pick on.
Continuity thing is a machine took them from the Alpha Quadrant and put them in the Delta Quadrant, and rather than use that machine to go back home, they destroyed it under the premise of preventing him from ever using it again.
Yeah, I wouldn't have made
That's
that
a trope. It's
Okay.
unprecedented.
We're going
That's
to
a
go
trope.
home. You're going to send us back home.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, you're sending us back.
We don't
home.
know
You're
these
gonna do it.
people.
Yeah, we don't
We
care
don't
about
owe-
these
we don't
people.
owe them
Send us the
anything.
hell back home. But then you have, it's
Not
like,
that
okay,
hot.
so let's do a comparison of storylines here. He has this machine that has the capability of transporting something the size and the mass of Voyager 70,000 light years across the freaking galaxy. Okay? And they destroy it. Take another science fiction movie. We have this ship capable of destroying an entire planet. It gets destroyed. There's another one already under construction.
Oh, you have no idea.
Probably a third and
But,
fourth
I
and
mean,
fifth.
but
There's a few more. You have
Oh,
no
I'm
idea.
sure.
When The Force
you know,
Awakens came out, I'm like, oh, look, a planet destroying weapon. Yay.
Not another
yeah,
one.
gee, never saw that one coming.
If you read the books, you'd realize there's about 7 of them.
I
But
mean,
anyway.
it's camping on. I mean, not camping. I'm betting on nostalgia. It's nostalgia's a safe bet for them, and they're doing that. I mean, I've seen what they're doing.
I guess it is, Paul, because, and
Yes.
here we go again. I'm going to stick my finger in the eye of the general public. You consume garbage, they will make more garbage. Grow up.
Which ship are
Consume
they?
better science fiction.
Which ship are they bringing back for Picard season 2? The Stargazer. It's a new
Please say it's-
Stargazer. It's a new Stargazer. It's the same registry number, except they put an 8 in front of it. So it's 8. I saw a video on this afternoon. It's
Oh
like
my God.
82934.
Where's my baseball bat? I need to hit myself.
I don't know why they just didn't say it's the 2934A. That's essentially what they're doing. I said they just put an 8 in front of it to make it a
Because they
bigger-
don't even remember their own history.
They probably
They
yeah.
can't think that far back.
So it's Picard, and since the Stargazer was his first ship that he had command of, they're going to redo it.
Well,
And
actually,
then
it wasn't even
ship.
what. Actually, it wasn't even. I don't think he was actually in command of it. He was like part of the bridge crew, and they ran into trouble, and he came up with the solution to get him out of it.
I think the other captain had died on it. He took command and did that
Yeah, he
shit,
took
and
command,
then they
and
lost the
wasn't
ship
the,
anyway.
Right.
Yeah, and yeah. Well, here's my
But
thing.
they're bringing
and
it back down.
You see it in you see it in the
is.
J.J. Abrams Star Trek. You see it in Picard with the Stargazer. You see it. It's what the hell? Okay, Starfleet, do me a favor. Okay, seriously. When somebody jumps the gun and they're an upstart, they do something incredibly freaking stupid that could have easily gone wrong. Don't make him a freaking captain.
What's the fun in that?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I
I don't know if that's a world building decision or bad writing. I think that's more bad writing.
Oh, I think one of the most
Plot driven storytelling is the
I think one of the most non-inspirational stories, the inspirational stories was when Captain Pike told Kirk, your father was the Starship commander for 7 minutes and 43 seconds. I think you could do better. Yeah, I'm thinking you could get it out to like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, what the hell?
Good world building is everybody on the Voyager has yearly promotions.
Except Ensign Kim, who was an ensign when they went in, and who was an ensign years later when
he
they
must
come
have
out.
had some pretty bad performance ratings.
Yeah. Well, I did see. I did.
Dude, you're just
I
standing
get bored
around
sometimes.
doing nothing.
I get bored sometimes, and I watch videos on stuff that they interest me. And one of them is what happened to the crew of the Voyager, and it pretty much the running joke was that Harry Kim didn't get promoted for like 20 years after they got back. Because even
been kicked out.
Well, I mean, even when in
Janeway
an
would have
episode
been
of Voyager,
Starfleet.
he comes from the future. He comes from the future to help them themselves in the past, and he's only a lieutenant commander. It's like, what the hell?
Poor guy.
bad reviews.
Well, I will say, and it goes back to world building or something, I don't know. But one of the things that always fascinated me about Star Trek was they use naval rank and all of that, and I'm fine with that because it makes sense because it's a ship, sure, whatever. But you have like you have like 60-year-old lieutenants and like 20-something captains, you know, 20-year-old captains.
Yeah,
and
and
you're going,
I never liked the very young chief engineers. No, you need to be in your 50s, dude.
yeah, you need to have somebody that's like a little bit crusty.
Your 40s or your 50s.
Yeah,
you got to be able to listen to that engine, and it'll tell you exactly what's wrong. You know exactly what fast.
Look, a good engineer could be walking through the decks and tell you what warp they were at, what direction they were heading, based off of how the deck plays.
None of these super genius young guys. So, no, just shut
they love the paragons. They all the paragons of San Francisco become members of Starfleet. So we gotta hire the brightest and the bravest and the best.
I still love in Relics when Scotty was trying to talk Geordi into doing something. Geordi's like, look, man, the specs say, and Scotty's like, who do you think wrote the specs? I did. Always conservative on paper.
I wrote the Oxford Dictionary. Don't correct me. J.R.R. Tolkien.
But it's but I think by and large that for me it really is a distraction when they can't get their continuity / world building correct. It grates on me because it's one thing that this person wrote this episode, this person wrote another episode, but then you have what the trilithium conundrum. Trilithium is either
trilithium. What is it?
It's either a byproduct of dilithium breaking down, or it is a super powerful explosive that the Romulans created. And which one it is just depends on what episode you catch.
Coaxium. Oh, could you have come up with a better name? Anyway.
Well, I mean, it's look, I as long as I stay away from things like unbelievable, unbelievum, and
unobtainium.
Unobtainium and stuff like that. But
we can't obtain it. It's over there, but we just can't reach it.
Yeah, well, I mean, but it's as we discussed before. Plasma coolant. Is it plasma that's used to cool something? Is it? Are they trying to cool plasma down to?
It must be hotter, so plasma is a coolant.
No,
I don't know.
I think they're trying to cool the plasma.
Could I change the direction of the discussion?
It doesn't make any sense in Star Trek for plasma coolant to exist. That baffled me a lot in Enterprise too. They got a 200-liter barrel of plasma coolant. So
whatever.
I mean, is it like engine coolant, or is it like plasma that?
I don't know. It cools the plasma because it's too hot because the engine is so good. I don't know.
I'm going to heat the ice. What?
But go ahead, Frank.
One of the things. Let me insult all artists, so they can all come and kill me. Artists are not engineers, and that's why a lot of facts are just. Or writers are not engineers, and you need good counselors. When you come up with an idea, you need to throw it at, I don't know, like a pair of F-15 mechanics and see what they say. Or somebody who's studied astrophysics. Take an idea and find someone who's an amateur physicist or an amateur astrophysicist or a chemist or whatever, a doctor. Make professional friends, people who have real answers, and throw your ideas at them and watch them torpedo them to death, and they come crashing to the ground, and you're like, let me start over. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Scott. Over to you guys.
Those are good ideas.
Well, I think it is rational and reasonable to do that, but also with the same token, I tend to find that especially Hollywood writers, they are the authority because they have decided they are the authority. Therefore, when they say it works this way, physics be damned, that's the way it works.
You'll find me watching Korean films on some streaming service. See you later, Hollywood. Anyway.
But again, you go, somebody posed a question on social media the other day. They were like, you guys realize that when a ship goes to warp, everybody would be killed, right? Because they smashed into the back wall. It's like, yeah, inertial dampers.
All right.
And I'm like, I was kind of surprised after all this time actually hearing that conversation, because that's been dealt with millions of times on the internet. It really has. I mean, that subject has been just killed. My thing is how the hell they hook them up to ships? Because every time something happens, they're offline.
Right.
I mean, it's like,
obviously the control panels don't have enough plasma coolant in them because they always explode.
Well, it's it's.
I'm just glad I went into the Air Force instead of art school. Otherwise, I'd be a complete idiot when it came to designing spacecraft.
Well, I mean, you've pointed out some things
That'd be
before,
John
stuff
Eaves.
like when you have an aircraft that has the intake above the canopy, or it's like, okay, well, that's great if it's in a dive, but if it pulls up in a loop,
you just got your.
It'll suffocate.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now to be fair.
Well, that just your intakes will tell you what that
Yeah.
aircraft is meant to do, meant to function, and what it can't
Right.
do. So it's not going to have a lot of maneuverability.
Not everybody knows, and I'll admit I didn't know it till I started dealing with jet engines on a regular basis. Is that the air going into an engine, regardless of how fast the aircraft is moving, the air going into it has to be subsonic.
Yes.
You put supersonic air into an engine, it's done. It's over with.
It's choked. You've choked it.
But that's why I always laugh when I see these shows, and or even it's like we're landing all of these X-wing fighters here, and there's people milling around, and there's small equipment sitting around not tied down, and there's no thrust. Like, thrust just doesn't freaking exist in that universe.
Repulsors, but I digress. Anyway.
Okay, repulsors. Tony Stark uses repulsors. They seem to have an effect on shit.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
Anti-gravity shield is
gravity shielding and gravity reversing, which I don't really know how that would affect someone underneath the craft in question.
Nobody really knows. I don't think you can.
We're not there yet.
Well, I even then, but there's still again the suspension of disbelief. You look at the X-wing fighter; it's got 4 freaking engines on it, and let's say, okay, they are equivalent of jet engines the same size,
except for
there are no external fuel tanks on these things. They are not freaking flying.
And the bottom 2 hold the landing gear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are those things?
John Dykstra, I love you, but you're not an engineer. You're an artist.
I think my only drawback to the Viper from Battlestar Galactica, my only issue with that is that, again, you've got an intake essentially, right behind the pilot.
They should take the blades off of those. I mean, I don't know why you need. I don't know why you need
radiators.
Etheric
rudders. No, that's Star Wars. Never mind.
But it's good they put the center of gravity. They put the cockpit at the center of gravity, so that your pilots don't have a lot of acceleration forces to deal with. But while there are openings,
well, my understanding is that
Ralph McQuarrie.
Yeah, somebody actually put one of those Viper mock-ups in an air tunnel, and it actually was pretty damn stable. Which is like, damn, that's
Yeah, it's got the nice nose for a counter weight.
Yeah.
So it should be nice and balanced. But you gotta have something heavy in it. Usually in a jet aircraft's engines are gonna be offset by the avionics equipment and the cockpit and the nose.
Yeah.
You're surprised they don't put them in the middle of it, or
right.
Like you see some concept
but
art,
once again,
where the cockpits are all kinds of places without any consideration for weight and balance.
Those Battlestar Galactica propeller-driven aircraft that had the prop behind the engine. I'm like, I'm a mechanic. I'm like, it's bad enough we got the torque converter there on a car. And if you have a problem with the torque converter, you got to take half the car apart to get to it. But that they needed you there, Paul, to say, no, that's a bad idea. Put the prop where it belongs on the front.
And the Japanese experiment with an aircraft like that too, so maybe that's where they took the inspiration. But they're just doing it to make it look like the Viper spacecraft, and you don't need to do that.
Look at a 59 Eldorado and look at a brand new Cadillac, and you're not going to see much of a familiarity, save maybe the logo, and even the logo is different. So again, you need wise counselors. Bring people in who know spacecraft, who know aircraft, who know automobiles. Even a knucklehead like me who fixes cars knows there's certain things. No, that's not going to work. Because of maintenance. How do you get that out? How do you service? You literally half the aircraft to service the prop, and a prop is going to damage a whole lot more frequently than an engine replacement. So it's like, we call that in the industry a maintenance defect.
Well, here's a theory though. Here's a theory that I have, and it's something that I think that by the time that something actually, if we actually get to, space exploration like in Star Trek, we will not have like systems like people think of them today.
No.
Correct.
We already have software that behaves like a radio. You can dial it in and tune in a radio station and listen to a radio station, and it's not a radio. It's a computer program running.
Right.
So that to me, and it was mentioned very, very briefly, but it goes back to the science part about it that I really love, is that Geordi LaForge was trying to explain to somebody how to fix something, and he finally looks at him and he goes, "If you can't bypass it, reprogram it," and walked off. And it's like, that makes sense.
Well, here's a trick I learned. You think what? No, I used to look at there used to be a website, Paleofuturism or something like to that effect, where this guy would find things in the past that were predicting the future or their future, or which is our present, or things of that nature. And the thing I notice most often is that people really don't know what future technology is going to look like, so they make it look something that they're familiar with.
Yep.
And I took that notion and I said, well, one thing I see that everybody does in concept art is make engines look like engines.
Yeah.
There's a nozzle, there's a thrust comes out of it and all that.
Sure.
So let's change that up and make things that produce thrust but don't look like your conventional nozzle engine.
Sure.
Things that are flat plates or domes or bowls that are producing thrust in some manner we don't yet understand.
I will say this.
Because I don't want to get too bogged down into, well, how could this work? Because then I could just invent it and be a millionaire. But
right, and that would be fun.
The technology should advance to some point where new things are learned and they figured out how to produce motive or impulsive forces.
Here's something that I've thought of, and I'm sure I'm not the first person. In fact, I guarantee you I am not the first person to discover this. But if you look at all of these science fiction shows, every one of them, there is one that stands out above the rest that accurately predicted most of the things that we have today. The Jetsons. Remote learning, working from home, teledoctors.
Right.
You go back and look at the show
now. They're not
and
quite
all the stuff that they have, and what is it? They got it right, and it's weird that it was a cartoon that did it.
Didn't he have some exercise machines too?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. He had a treadmill outside his
treadmill.
Yeah, he had a treadmill.
I do have a robot in my basement that vacuums the basement, so it doesn't cook food though.
Dude, we have a robot that sits in the corner, and every now and again it comes out and it like goes around the house, and then goes back.
Yes.
It's like, it's not Rosie. But
no.
I'd love to have a Rosie. I'd love to have a sarcastic, artificial intelligence running
Yes.
around my house, being snide all the time.
I would be less worried about the machine apocalypse if it had that attitude. It's the ones that are nice to you. Those are the ones you got to keep an eye on.
Well, I don't know.
That's a good.
So
Yeah.
wise counselors.
So Jetsons had good world building.
They had good world building and aside, well, see, here's my thing. The one thing that they missed, which I'm glad they did, simply because of the sheer number of people I know that on a regular basis run out of gas. Flying cars. We got people that would do that. They would climb into one of these freaking flying cars, knowing they ain't got the fuel to get to where they're going, and they'd crash land somewhere.
Yeah, or houses that are on little stems.
Yeah,
That could be raised above the atmosphere. A camping trip to the moon. That's actually not bad. I'm thinking about the Jetsons now.
Yeah,
and that was one episode. George had to take the Cub Scouts, Space Scouts, whatever. They had to take them to the moon for a vacation. I'm like, that could happen in our lifetime. That might be a thing.
I think really, and it goes back to actual science, part of science fiction. I really think that if we are looking at going out to other planets, we probably need to start with the closest one and get it right.
The moon, yeah,
before moving on. I'm not saying, maybe it would be a good thing, but there was in the movie First Contact with Star Trek, Riker mentions that there's 6 million people living on the moon.
Right. Well, you can look throughout different franchises, and that's kind of a thing. Expanse, the moon is fully developed.
Yeah.
It's 300,000 miles away. I mean, if there was a road there, you could drive there. It's not that far.
Yeah. Whatever good warranty.
Heinrich did a whole book on the moon. Moon is a harsh mistress. So yeah, it's definitely a lot of science fiction authors think about that.
Yeah.
It's easy. It's an easy place to get there. Once you conquer atmospheric conditions, you have gravity. It's crappy gravity, but you got gravity. In a moon is a harsh mistress. They stayed underground.
Okay, if we argue that gravity is due to mass,
right?
Okay,
not a bad argument.
And by the time you construct a facility on the moon, that's going to have some mass to it. That's going to add to the overall mass. I mean,
where's that mass coming from?
We're just moving off the Earth to the moon. But you're gonna make
and this drives people crazy when I say it, especially Frank and Paul, because they hate my theory. Is that the moon has exactly the same gravity as Earth. The problem is the Earth is 6 times larger than the moon. That's why gravity on the moon is only 1/6 of what the Earth is, because the Earth's gravity is overpowering it. It's a crappy scientific thing.
It's not even science.
Buy this when I pass this off.
Well, see, the problem is that the gravity on the dark side of the moon.
I'll take this out to save you the embarrassment from the scientific community.
But anyway.
They're never going to buy this on my dissertation for my PhD. They're never going to do it, but it's going to be fun turning it in.
Come on. Newton figured the math out on that, Scott. Okay.
Well, I know, but I mean, it's all relative anyway, at least according to Einstein.
You just put a black hole in the middle of the moon, and you make it
Thunder the Barbarian. No, that was
make it the right size. You get the right gravity. That's what Alistair Reynolds did in one of his novels.
I think one of the celestial mechanic things that I really absolutely love is the fact that the moon rotates on its axis at the same rate that it circles the Earth. Therefore, the same side of the moon is always facing the Earth.
It's tidal locking.
Tidal lock. It's not the only. It's not the only body. There are other moons that are also tidal locked.
That's
Charon and Pluto are tidal locked, co-locked to each other. So it's theoretically possible to build a bridge between Charon and Pluto, which would be cool.
Pluto. Okay,
would be kind of
sorry.
cool,
Hold on. Time out. Wait, I'm old school, dude.
Oh, now you're giving me ideas.
I'm old school. Pluto is a planet. Period. There are 9 freaking planets. Okay.
Yes, I'm not arguing with you.
No.
You know?
Well, you
But
know,
no, they
people
Charon
said
Who
Pluto
had the
face each
audacity
other.
to decide after hundreds of years? No, it's not. Who?
we gotta
No matter who.
we gotta redefine things.
They always look at each other. So
Yeah.
and they co-orbit in a ratio of 2 to 3. So it is feasible that we can run a bridge from Pluto to Charon, which would save on a lot of lifting costs. Although I don't know what the heck we would do there. There might be some mining possibilities, but
You never know.
I think it would be interesting that, and I've found this to be ironic in world building to tie it in, is that I remember scientists saying if we ever find water on another planet, we will find life. And they have found water on other planets. And
Yeah.
what have they not found?
no life.
Life.
Mars,
It's hard to find.
for
It's like-
Mars to be covered in iron oxide, there needs to be water to rust the iron. But there is. They have found water on Mars in its liquid state. Saline as hell, but there is liquid on Mars.
Yeah.
They're going to find liquid on Europa, and they're not going to find any life there because it's too cold.
Yeah.
Oh, I love the speculation.
lots of moons are just pure ice.
There was a planet that somebody had discovered recently, and it was like, it's
pure.
Its atmosphere is like pure diamonds. And I'm like, that's really kind of going to be difficult to breathe, isn't it?
Carbon. Talk about a carbon footprint.
Well, hey, don't get me started on that one, because otherwise I'll mention inconvenient facts like the entire planet Earth as a whole has been carbon neutral for 15 freaking years.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But yeah,
I don't know. In my world building book, carbon dioxide is actually good for herbivorous life. So I could be wrong.
Oh, it is true.
I think as a slight digression, that's what's always stumped me. We need to lower our CO2 emissions. Well, if we lower our CO2 emissions, that lowers the amount of air, for lack of a better term, that plants will breathe in and give us oxygen. Now, I don't know if you were there that day they taught it in school, but for human beings, oxygen's kind of important.
Scott, you're a genius.
I'm not a genius. I'm a madman. In a box.
In a box.
Modern science, 21st century science, to be in a dark age because it's frequently hijacked by politics, by political motivations.
Sure.
And maybe that's why science fiction is also in a dark age. I had never made that correlation, but
look, here's the thing.
I think we had better scientists in the 60s and the 50s who really, and it wasn't until 69 when they got that report saying that the coastal cities of the United States would be underwater by the year 2000. Yeah, that prediction came through.
No. You have to understand, I'm older than a lot of people that I hang out with. I remember being told in school, by the time I became a senior in high school, we would be in the middle of an ice age.
Yes, I remember that.
No, it's going to be
was the 70s.
Acid rain.
Yes, acid rain.
It's going to be killer bees. No. I don't want to brag, dude. I survived like 24 freaking end of the world scenarios because they didn't come true.
I think we should do an episode on doomsday prediction and what science fiction author had the best doomsday predictions. That would be a cool episode.
That would be cool.
But I think though that the one, like you said, science fiction has been hijacked by, policy, if you will.
Politics.
Real science. Real science has been hijacked.
Political science.
You look at what's going on now. Now they're starting to admit that all the stuff that the conspiracy theorists have been saying is right.
Oh yeah. Here we go. An off-topic tangent. You just can't stay on topic. We're talking about world building. We're not talking about whatever you're talking about. Why does this happen all the time? I get so sick of it. Just shut the hell up about whatever you rambling on about. Because Even Scott looks kind of bored. Look at him. He's just moving around like I don't believe anything this guy's saying.
The Expanse
They're
was
friends. They
better than
talk all
average
the time.
science fiction we've seen in the past 30 years.
Sure.
It really, I mean, I love seeing ships approaching with their booster nozzles facing as they're decelerating. You know,
Yeah.
that was higher quality science fiction. That's a recent bar that we should set, and subsequent science fiction needs to jump over that.
Well, but the problem with that is that you know, it's easier to warp into, you know, a place and just stop, you know, than it is to spend half your time accelerating and half your time decelerating so that nobody gets killed
Right.
on the trip there, which is going to make that trip a couple of weeks as opposed to 10 or 15 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
But
unless you have a really good torch ship, you know, with
I would
a
say
massive reaction drive. But
yeah.
But
Well,
you have to slow down at the same speed as you
right
or
as
acceleration as you sped up. Otherwise, you're not going to hit your mark.
yes.
You're going to be.
Now, you know, you talk about world building. Planet of the Apes, the novel from the early 60s, Pierre Boulle had them spin the ship at halfway to Betelgeuse, and then they began decelerating. So older.
Yeah, they understood it.
That book was social commentary, yet he got his science right.
Yeah.
You know, it's like these modern science fiction writers need to pick up an occasional book. You got to do, as Brian Daly would say, you got to do your basic research.
And a lot of the older authors are also scientists.
Look at how many science fiction shows mention climate change.
Yeah, those guys are going to be talking politics for a good solid 10, 15 minutes. I don't know. It was a long time and had nothing to do with world building. You know, world building can be pretty crucial to your content. It's the setting, it's the stage that your story takes place on, I think it's better to have it laid out first, and you can drop your story into your setting as it is. For instance, I'm writing something. I'm more or less a hobbyist writer, and I had my characters on a planet that I had created somewhat. I knew its physical properties, and I had forgotten about them because I never used this planet, but there was an opportunity to use it, and I had some action scenes set on it. And when I went back and looked at my notes for it, I realized it had a higher gravity, like 1.37 Gs. So I had to go back into the story and make some changes. I had to add an exoframe to the pressure suit. Could have just as easily just changed the gravity of the planet, but I thought it was more important to keep what I had decided on as opposed to changing it after the fact, just to make it convenient. But it did add, or it gave me an opportunity to increase tension in the story, because now with things happening at 13 meters per second, some things happen a little bit faster. Of course, when things are falling or people are falling or things of that nature, it's a little bit more tense. A little bit, the conflict is, and the stakes are raised up a little bit. So that's one of the things. So if I had just kept it like a normal around 1G, it would have been kind of just normal or not as exciting or like what you would expect.
Anyway,
all right. Well, that has been what it is of Your Father's Sci-Fi show for today. If you like the show, give us a thumbs up. If you didn't, give us a thumbs down. If you really got caught up in what was happening, go ahead and click the subscribe button. And remember to tell us in the comments how drunk you got